Chapter 3. Contracts. As morning came, Naruto found himself waking up to a strangely warm and familiar feeling. It wasn't one he had felt often. In fact, he could count the number of times he felt this way on one hand. And one of those times he felt this way, he was too busy trying to figure out why he wasn't dead to notice the feeling until well after he was awake. That was not the case now. With no injuries making his mind turn elsewhere and having had a good night's rest, Naruto was perfectly aware of the naked female body lying next to him on the bed. Or rather, the naked female body that was snuggled directly into his side. Looking to his left and down, the first thing he saw was red hair fanned out across his body. With the sunlight streaming through his window, hitting her hair just so, it made the long red tresses look like crystallized flames. Naruto was not one to wax poetic, but it was easily the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The second thing he saw was Rias as she slept on peacefully, blissfully unaware that he had woken up. The covers had been pulled down to their waist, exposing her enviable bust for his eyes to see. She was turned slightly on her side, facing him, and was using his shoulder as a pillow. Naruto could feel every inch of her bountiful curves as they pressed into him, as they were pulled flush against him. He did not have much experience with women, but he did have some. Contrary to popular belief back home, he wasn't completely inept when it came to the opposite sex. He'd had Jiraiya as a teacher. For God's sakes, you didn't come back from a 3-year training trip with the world's biggest pervert and not pick some things up. And Sakura always said he was dense. Ha! Who's dense now? Not him. No siree. He wasn't dense in the slightest. Well, maybe he was just a little dense, just a bit. Anyways, those few women he had previous sexual encounters with were all put to shame by the beauty lying against him. He really didn't think there was another creature that could possibly be as beautiful as this girl right here. Of course, these were all secondary thoughts. Things he noted with interest but was not really concerned with. There was only one thing he currently wanted to know. How had she gotten in? That was the first thing Naruto wanted to know. He had a ton of traps set up all around his apartment, especially by the windows and the front door. They only ever came down when he needed to leave and came back up immediately after he left, and he had made sure she had not seen how his traps worked when they left for school the other day. So how had she managed to get into his bedroom? Was there some kind of method of breaking and entering people's bedrooms that devils had that could bypass all his defenses? Not that Naruto was actually complaining, mind you. While not as bad as, say, Issei, Naruto was still a healthy male, and he'd had Jiraiya as his sensei. Even if Naruto did not follow in his godfather's footsteps of peeping on women, he still had a larger than average libido. He was just better at not showing it and had more respect for women than either Jiraiya or Issei did. That's what happened when you had Haruno Sakura as a teammate and Senju Tsunade as a mother figure. You gained a healthy amount of respect and fear of women. Having Shizune as an older sister figure probably hadn't helped either. Damn, that was a lot of women who hated perverts in his life. Good thing he had Kakashi and Jiraiya to offset those women's influence. Shaking his head, Naruto dispelled those nonsensical thoughts. None of them helped him with his current problem, namely, what should he do now? It was morning, so technically speaking, he should probably get up and get started on breakfast, or maybe even take a shower before Rias woke up so that she could use it after him. At the same time, Naruto glanced down at the girl using him as a pillow. His arm was wrapped loosely around her thin waist, his hand resting on the middle of her back, pulling her closer. He could feel her body pressed against his. Her bare breasts felt magnificent against his torso, and one of her legs had hooked itself around his right leg sometime during the night. The silky smoothness of her skin brought an almost intolerable pleasure, causing shivers to run down his spine. Her hair was splayed out across his chest, draping him in a crimson curtain of velvety satin. She hadn't done that the last time she slept with him. At least he was sure she had not done this last time. Then again, his mind had not been all there when he first woke up. For all he knew, she could have been this close and he just pushed her off when he sat up. Hadn't she told him that healing him had required them to have as much skin contact as possible? Makes you wonder why she was here now. As much as he knew he should probably get breakfast started or something, he really didn't want to leave the comfortable warmth that having a beautiful girl sleeping with him brought. And so, Naruto decided to relax. If he was late for school, so be it. He was far too comfortable to move right now. And he didn't really care about school, so it was a win-win situation in his book. As he let his mind wander to nonsensical thoughts like, what kind of ramen should I have for lunch today? And, I wonder if Sakura managed to pull that stick out of Sasuke's ass yet? His hand began to absently rub up and down Ria's torso and hips. This action caused the girl snuggled against him to begin stirring. As a soft yawn escaped from the red-haired, greenish blue-eyed girl's mouth, Naruto looked down to see Rias lifting her head from his shoulder and blinking several times as she found him staring at her. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," Rias mumbled, smiling a bit. Naruto returned the smile with one of his own. "Good morning, Rias. I'm kind of surprised to see you today." He frowned, turning his head a bit so that she would not see the expression on his face. "I kinda expected you to still be with Issei." He tried not to show it, but it bothered him to think of her with Issei. He still wasn't jealous though, just concerned. "You know, since you healed him last night and all." Rias pushed herself into a sitting position, once again heedless of her own nudity. Naruto found his eyes unconsciously traveling towards her breasts as they bounced and jiggled with each movement made. They were very perky despite their size. No sag at all. Even though they were quite large, it looked like they didn't even need a bra to stay uplifted. Her pink nipples and areola looked very enticing right now. In that moment, he wanted nothing more than take those pert nipples in his mouth and suckle on them. And did he really just think that? Damn that Jiraiya. Even in death, his corruption ran deep. Naruto supposed he should just be glad he didn't end up like Issei. He could only imagine the trouble he would have gotten in had he been like that kid. He shuddered at the thought of all the beatings he would have received from Sakura and Tsunade. "I thought about it," Rias replied to his unasked question. Her words also had the effect of knocking him out of his small moment of perversion and caused him to look her in the eye. But decided against it. While Issei's reaction to my presence would have been amusing, I felt it might be a bit too much if I were to appear naked in his bed. "Is that so?" Naruto released a breath he did not know he had been holding, something Rias immediately noticed and latched onto. "Why do you ask?" There was an innocent smile on her face that Naruto felt really did not belong there. It was far too innocent to be real. "Ah, no real reason, I guess," Naruto mumbled a bit. He felt strangely vulnerable under that gaze. "Just a bit worried about my new friend." When Rias merely continued smiling, Naruto felt an inexplicable urge to explain himself. "It's just that I know perverts very well. My old sensei was the biggest pervert I've ever met, so I know how they work. If you were to show up in Issei's bed, naked, he may try to take advantage of you." Rias hummed thoughtfully, but still didn't say anything. For some reason, it was making Naruto a bit self-conscious. "So, why did you decide to come here and not simply head back home?" he asked, simply for lack of having anything better to say. Rias tilted her head, the smile still on her face. "I just wanted to become closer to my cute, new servant, nothing more." "That's the only reason?" "Yep." "So, you do this to be closer to your servants?" Naruto mumbled before looked back at Rias. "Does that mean you've done this with Yuto, Kanakoa and Akeno as well?" "Well, no," Rias shook his head, "but Yuto's not really the type to enjoy this sort of thing. And Akeno and Kaneko-chan aren't really into this either." Although, the red-haired beauty looked immensely thoughtful as she seemed to remember something. "I have occasionally slept with Akeno. We are best friends after all, so it's only natural." "I see." He really didn't, but said that for lack of having anything of substance to say. "Anyways, you should probably take a shower and get dressed while I make breakfast." A smile crept onto Rias' face, causing Naruto to deadpan. "That's why you're here, isn't it? So I can cook for you?" "Of course not," Rias smiled indulgently, "that's just a bonus." "Whatever," Naruto sighed, "just take a shower. Cat CHRP." Rias sighed softly as she stood in the shower. Steaming hot droplets of water ran down her gorgeous body, coasting over her slender shoulders, climbing across the two large mounds on her chest and making adventurous trips through the valley of her breasts. They ran down her smooth, flat stomach and followed the small, trimmed patch of red hair before roving across the valley of her lips and, finally, falling off to join the thousands of other drops of water on the shower floor while other droplets ran the longer course across her beautifully shaped thighs and calves. As she finally decided to pick up the bar of soap and wash herself, on a side note, Naruto had good taste in soap. Her mind wandered towards one of her newest servants. Namely, the blonde one whose apartment she was currently in. She had not been lying when she said that her reason for not still being with Issei was because she thought him waking up to a naked woman might be a bit much. As funny as his reaction would be, she didn't want him to be distracted from what she would eventually need to tell him, and if he was thinking about her breasts, he would be distracted. But there had been another reason for her to come to Naruto, and it was not just because he had actually made a very good breakfast last time. There was something strange about Naruto. Of the circumstances that led to him being here. He showed up at her school exactly 1 month ago, and exactly 1 month ago her brother had given her a very special mutated piece. Something so rare only every 1 in 100 devils had one. There was simply no way these two incidents were not connected. Her brother knew that Naruto would be going to her school and knew that there was something special about him. Rias wanted to find out what, and since she had not been able to get in contact with her brother, he was likely doing something stupid again. She would have to figure out why Naruto was so special by spending time with him and learning more about him. That was why she had decided to come over to his house, why she spent so much time with him. What's more, the mutated piece she had used looked nothing like the other ones she had seen. Her brother had a few of them, so she knew what they looked like. They always still carried the general shape of what they once were. The mutated piece he gave her looked nothing like a standard chess piece. It wasn't a pawn, nor a rook, knight, bishop or queen. It wasn't a king either. It was none of those things. That intrigued her as well. There must be something truly special about Naruto if the only evil piece that worked for him was this unique mutated piece that she had never seen before. That it wasn't considered a standard evil piece, and therefore meant she still had her bishop, knight and rook pieces was the icing on the proverbial cake. Stepping out of the shower, Rias began the long, arduous process of drying herself off. Most of the drying was simply her hair, which she had a lot of. It had been suggested that she cut it before, but Rias rather liked her hair and wouldn't hear anything of it. Besides, Naruto had complimented her hair, for some reason that made her feel it was special. After getting dressed in her school uniform, the young Gremory heiress made her way into the kitchen. It wasn't actually what she would call a kitchen, more of a small place to cook combined with a moderately sized living room. The kitchen was incredibly tiny and only separated from the rest of the room by the floor changing from carpet to tile. Naruto was standing over the stove, making breakfast. She didn't know what it was, but it smelled pretty good. Deciding to see out what he was making, she walked directly behind him, pressed her chest against his back and placed her chin on his shoulder as she looked over him to the pan. "What are you making?" "Just scrambled eggs." Naruto did not seem all that surprised by her sudden action. It made her rather curious. Most people would have at least been surprised. Most men would have gotten a nosebleed or at least a blush with how she was pressing her breasts against his back. Naruto, he acted as if he knew what she was going to do before she had even done it. "However, I decided to add some whole milk, cheddar cheese and chopped vegetables to it," he continued, heedless of her inner thoughts. "I never used to like vegetables back when I was younger, but my godfather showed me that if I cook them in something, then I can make it so that I don't taste them while I eat." "That's certainly an interesting way of making sure you eat healthy," Rias commented airily as she filed something more important away. His mention of having a godfather. "I thought you didn't have family." "I don't." Naruto paused. It was only for a moment, but Rias noticed the hitch in his voice enough to realize what she had just said. "Sorry," she mumbled softly. With guilt setting in, Rias wrapped her arms around his torso, hugging him from behind. "I didn't mean to bring that up again." "It's fine." Naruto blew out a deep breath. She turned her head slightly to look at him from out of the corner of her eye and saw him looking back with a very small, understanding smile. "You're curious. I get that. I don't blame you for that, and I really don't mind telling you a little about myself." Her response to his words was to tighten her hold on him. "I hadn't even met my godfather until I turned 12, Naruto informed her, because he had a very important job that was too dangerous for him to take me with. He had to leave me in the village. Of course, I didn't even know he was my godfather until after he had been killed. He had never mentioned that to me. I'm still a little pissed at him for that." "Killed?" Rias was surprised by how startled she sounded. Or maybe not. Hearing the words from her newest peerage member's lips was shocking. To think that one of her servants had both his parents and godfather killed so early in his life. She could only imagine how he must feel. Rias didn't know if she would have been able to go on if her parents or brother died. "Yeah, he was killed by a former student of his," Naruto said solemnly. "A man by the name of Nagato." I confronted my fellow apprentice several weeks after Ero Sennin's death and we managed to reach an understanding. I still haven't forgiven him, the blonde added as an afterthought, but at the same time, I know that Ero Sennin would be disappointed in me if I walked down the path of revenge. So even though he killed our sensei, I won't allow myself to hate him. I see. Rias grew silent as she contemplated the blonde's words. She had already noticed it by now despite the short time she had known him. But Naruto, in spite of that happy-go-lucky attitude of his, was incredibly mature for someone his age. In some ways, his thoughts and maturity reminded her of her brother. When her brother wasn't being stupid at least. The crimson-haired devil wondered what he must have gone through to gain such maturity for someone so young. She also hoped against all hope that he did not act as stupid as her brother sometimes did. Breakfast is just about done. Naruto's voice snapped Rias out of her thoughts. You should go sit down. I'll bring it out to you in just a minute. Okay, Rias decided to do as asked. She unwrapped her arms from his torso and walked over to the small table where she sat down. She watched as Naruto went about getting 2 plates and some silverware. He placed the scrambled eggs on the plates and walked over to place one of them in front of her while the other was set on the opposite side of the table. Would you like anything to drink? Rias scrunched up her nose and thought, milk is fine. Or orange juice, if you have any. I definitely have orange juice, Naruto grinned as he got 2 glasses from the cabinet and a pitcher of orange juice from the fridge. With a name like that, how could I not? Rias giggled as the blonde brought the glasses of orange juice to the table. I guess the color orange really is your favorite, she commented lightly as he put the glass in front of her. Breakfast was actually kind of pleasant. They didn't really talk much, but that was okay with Rias as it gave her time to digest and think over of the bits of information she had learned about the young man who had joined her peerage. He was a very open and friendly person. Even when she mentioned things that clearly still hurt to think about, he didn't get mad and answered all of her questions. She didn't doubt for 1 minute that he was being honest with her. She could already tell he was not the type to lie. Though a part of her felt like there was much more to learn. Despite being so friendly, the boy sitting at the table, sharing breakfast with her was still very much a mystery. A mystery she aimed to solve. Naruto-kun, Rias started, making the blonde look up from his plate. Would you mind doing me a favor? Sure, Naruto shrugged, as if to say it was no problem. What do you need me to do? After school today, I need you to grab Issei and bring him to the occult research club room, Rias told him. I think it's time I introduce him to rest of my peerage and explain his situation to him. Also, there are some things I need to inform you and him on that comes with being a newly minted devil. Like those contract things you mentioned last night? Asked Naruto. Yes, Rias smiled at him. So will you do it? Of course. Naruto's bright grin came full force. He gave the redhead a thumbs up. It was kind of corny, but also seemed like a very Naruto-ish thing to do. Don't you worry, Rias. I'll bring the perv to the clubroom after school today. Cat CHRP. Issei groaned as the last day of class ended. Nothing seemed to be going right for the young pervert whose only real desire was to see a pair of real-life breasts. This entire week had been one big mess of confusion and anxiety. It all started with that beating he and his 2 friends had received at the hands of the Kendo Club, followed with being stabbed by his apparently non-existent ex-girlfriend and culminating in getting stabbed once more by a person who had black angel's wings just like Yuma did. Honestly, with all the bad things going down in his life it almost felt like someone was out to get him. Maybe God was trying to smite him for being so perverted? Nah, that couldn't be it. It was the day after that last attack, and he had no clue as to what was going on. This morning, he had woken up in his bed, the wound on his chest completely healed as if it had never happened and he was feeling inexplicably tired for some reason, not to mention confused and worried. Issei couldn't help but feel like he was slowly going insane. Not even the thought of peeping on the girls at school while they were in the locker room was enough to help him out of his worry. Which really just drove the point home. That Issei, a male known for his incredible lust, was too worried to even peek on girls when they were changing. Well, then you just knew there was something wrong. Muttered whispers broke out around the classroom, but Issei ignored them and his friends' inane chatter about the girls they would be peeping on soon. He was too tired to care right now. Oi! A loud, brash voice sounded out. Ero debate game. Issei looked up at the sound of the voice, his curiosity getting the better of him. To see the same blonde he had been so sure would have remembered Yuma standing in front of him with a bright grin on his face. For some reason, that grin made Issei really want to punch him. "Are you talking to me?" he asked uncertainly. "Who else would I be talking to?" the blonde asked rhetorically. "Rias wants to talk to you, so I'm here to escort you to see her. Now pack your crap and let's go." Issei stared at the boy in confusion. Rias, as in, Rias Gremory, one of the two great ladies of Kuo Academy, wanted to talk to him? Why? Cat CHRP, Naruto walked into the occult research club room with a confused Issei following behind him. All of the members were already there. Rias was standing with her arms crossed under her impressive bust while Akeno stood behind her, hands clasped together in front of her, which had the effect of pushing that monstrously large chest together in a very appealing way. Leaning against the wall to his right was Kiba, and sitting on the couch, munching on some manju was Kaneko. "Ohio Mina," Naruto stated cheerfully as he walked in and sat down next to Kaneko. Trailing in after him, looking both unsure of himself and incredibly aroused as he stared at the trio of beautiful girls he now found himself in the presence of, Issei took a seat in one of the empty easy chairs. Era, Akeno sounded incredibly amused by the young blonde teen's greeting. "Good afternoon, Kitsune-kun." "Kitsune?" Naruto tilted his head inquisitively. "Whisker marks," Kaneko commented as she set her food down on the table and crawled over to the blonde. "Ah," Naruto murmured as he absently rubbed a finger down one of the whisker-like markings on his face. During that time, Kaneko sat herself down on his lap and looked up at him imploringly. Naruto got the hint and grinned as he raised a hand and began to gently run his fingers along her scalp. Kaneko sighed happily as she once more experienced bliss. Wanting to get more of that incredible feeling, the first year curled herself against Naruto and began rubbing her face against his chest. That just made him even more amused and he couldn't help but indulge the girl a little more. Definitely a cat. A little ways away, Issei looked like he was trying to decide whether he wanted to strangle the blonde for what he was doing or worship him for that same damn reason. To think, this boy, no, this man, was capable of getting such a cute little Kohei to enjoy sitting on his lap. It was both awe-inspiring and incredibly depressing for the perverted student who would like nothing more than for a girl to sit on his lap and rub her face against his chest like that. Era, Akeno giggled at the sight of the normally stoic girl turning into a puddle from the blonde's simple head petting. "She really has taken a liking to our Kitsune-kun, hasn't she, bucko?" "Bucko?" Akeno looked over at her best friend and king, and promptly felt a bead of seat trickle down the side of her forehead when she saw Rias staring disapprovingly at Naruto as he pampered the 15-year-old, silver-haired first year. Era. Being Akeno, however, she recovered from her surprise very quickly. "Is someone feeling a bit jealous of Kaneko-chan?" asked Akeno, causing Rias to finally turn her head from the scene to face her queen, the frown growing even more prominent. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't," was Akeno's sly reply. Ufu. Rias ignored her best friend's demure giggling and cleared her throat quite loudly. Everyone looked over at her. Well, almost everyone. Kaneko was still in paradise as Naruto's hands were now in the process of carefully rubbing along her ears, which had the girl emitting an audible purr that rumbled from deep within her chest. Rias' eye twitched. "Well," she stated, doing her best to ignore Kaneko. She wasn't angry or jealous. No sir. She just didn't like being ignored. "Now that you're here, Issei, I would like to welcome you to the Occult Research Club." "Ah, no," Issei rubbed the back of his head as he tried to think of what to say in this situation. It wouldn't be so hard if all the girls around him weren't so beautiful. He was having trouble just figuring out which pair of breasts to look at. Rias Oppai were so perky, yet Akeno's senpai seemed to have the biggest bust, and there was something to be said for Kaneko's cute little boobs too. They were so cute. Thank you for having me. I'll be in your care." Rias smiled, or tried to smile. She didn't quite succeed, so she eventually gave up. Deciding to give it up as a lost cause, she continued speaking. "As you know, I am Rias Gremory. The one behind me is Himejima Akeno. The person leaning against the wall is Yuto Kiba, and the two people." Her eyebrow twitched again. "Sitting on the couch are Tujo Kaneko and Uzumaki Naruto. We, that is to say, all five of us, are devils." As the silence stretched on, with only the sound of Kaneko's purring to accompany the chirping of crickets, Issei could only sit there, blinking stupidly as he tried to come to grips with what he had just been told. He scratched the back of his head. Could you repeat that? I could have sworn you just said you guys were devils. We are, Rias confirmed. To further emphasize her point, she, Akeno, Kiba and Naruto all sprouted black devil wings from their backs. Kaneko would have done so as well, but, well, she was still in happy land. Issei could only stare at the wings coming from behind everyone else in shock. Wait, he pointed at them, yelling his head off in surprise. So you guys really are devils? I don't see why you're so surprised, said Naruto, smiling down at the girl on his lap. She really was just too adorable for her own good. You're a devil too, after all. Huh? That comment threw Issei for a loop. Him? A devil? What nonsense was this? Wouldn't he know if he was a devil or not? Shouldn't there be some kind of sign or something? Aside from an irritating rash on his skin that he got a while ago, he did not feel any different. And he didn't have any desire to go out and sacrifice puppies or something. Just look at your back, Rias suggested. You have wings just like the rest of us. I do? Issei's question was answered by the sound of cloth tearing. Looking behind him, the boy found himself in shock to see that he really did have wings sprouting from his back. Black devil wings that reminded him of a bat's, much like the ones everyone else was sporting. This just seemed to depress him. I really am a devil, the boy nearly wailed as he crumbled to his knees. As he pressed his hands against the floor to keep himself from falling, all those present watched as a small, gray rain cloud appeared over the second-year student's head and began sprinkling him in a light drizzle. Cue massive sweat drop. Anyways, Rias cleared her throat and tried to ignore the boy who was getting her floor wet with that strange rain cloud. Just where had it come from anyways? Some kind of strange devil power that she did not know of? I reincarnated you as a devil and my servant after you were killed by a fallen angel a few days ago and… The girl trailed off uncertainly as the boy continued looking like a despondent young man who had just been dumped by his ex-girlfriend. Or stabbed through the chest with a light spear by his ex-girlfriend. Are you even listening to me? No, he wasn't. Issei was currently in the middle of a midlife, or is that young life, crises. He had just been told he was a devil and he had wings on his back, and this was on top of everything else that had happened this week. Not only that, but he still had yet to see a pair of real-life boobs. It was official, he really was going insane. Naruto sighed as he watched the depressed kid get soaked to the bone by that strange cloud of rain. Deciding that he should do something about this, because seeing the normally carefree if incredibly perverted second year have a look of someone who had just had his puppy killed was pathetic. He carefully set Kaneko down and stood up. He didn't get to move very far as the white-haired girl in question grabbed his sleeve. The blonde looked down at the girl, who was giving him large, puppy dog, or would that be kitten, eyes that nearly had him bending down and scooping her back into his arms. Was this how most women felt when dealing with cute things? God, he hoped not. Naruto didn't want to become a woman. He was perfectly happy being a man. Thank you very much. Don't worry, he told Kaneko as he patted her head. I'll be right back. Ooh, okay, Kaneko mumbled. She looked up at him with her big, amber-colored eyes. But come back soon. Goo. That look should be illegal. Naruto was almost overwhelmed by the cute. Don't worry. I won't be more than a few seconds. Kaneko finally let go of his shirt sleeve, and Naruto turned to look at Rias, who was looking very unsure of what to do. Not that he blamed her. Rias. He got her attention. Do you mind if I… He gestured over to the still despondent Issei. Not at all, Rias looked relieved. She really didn't know what to do in this situation. Most people went through shock when they realized they had been turned into a devil, but she had never seen someone look so depressed before. And her floor was now soaking wet from that rain cloud. Thanks, Naruto flashed her a quick grin before turning around and walking over to Issei. Without pause or hesitation, the blonde grabbed the boy by the back of his collar, hauling him to his feet, and began dragging him along as he walked towards the door. Oi, what do you think you're doing? Don't worry, I just have to explain a few things. I think you'll appreciate what I have to tell you. Naruto's voice faded into the distance as he left the room and walked down the hall. So, what do you think Naruto-san wanted to tell Issei? Asked Kiba, finally deciding to speak up for the first time since they got to the clubroom. Who knows, Rias said, shrugging her shoulders helplessly as she gave an, I'm just as clueless as you, look. I just hope that whatever it is, it gets Issei to stop moping. She didn't think her carpet could take much more water damage. I want more head petting. Everyone's sweat dropped as Kaneko spoke in the monotone voice she was so well known for. It was even stranger because of what she was talking about. Era. Everyone except for Akano, that is, who really just looked amused by the girl's unusual antics. A few minutes after they left, Issei came running into the room, a fire in his eyes. He went straight towards a stunned Rias, who almost took a step back when the perverted male got right in her face. Is it true that if I get strong enough I can have a harem? Rias was at a loss for words. Just what did Naruto tell this boy? I guess. If you get strong enough, you can eventually be considered a high-class devil and have your own peerage, which can be like a harem, sort of. She trailed off when she saw Issei's face light up even more. The young man grinned, his eyes burning with an unyouthful, as Guy would say, fire as his hands clenched into fists. Yeah. The shout was so startling and loud that Rias took a step back. I want to be a devil. Now I can throw away all of my porno mags, he shouted without shame. Then he crouched down, a look of utter defeat on his face, his index finger drawing circles on the floor. No, I can't do that. Those are my treasures. There's no way I could give them up just because I have a harem. Porn and sex are two different things. When you said we might have an idiotic little brother join our peerage, I hadn't realized he would be so enthusiastic. Akano tried to find the right word to describe the boy. Well, enthusiastic was certainly an accurate description of Issei, though lecherous would have worked much better. He's certainly unique. Rias tried to be diplomatic. Failing that, she turned her head to look at Naruto as he sat back down again and was immediately globed by Kaneko. Just what did you say to him? I just explained one of the many perks he could get if he works really hard at being a good devil. Naruto explained with an amused grin as he went back to pampering his cute little Kohei. Being a male, and one who is used to dealing with people like him, I knew how to explain his situation in a way that would help him get over his issues quickly. Right. Rias looked over at the now fired up Issei and wondered if using his perverseness to make him get over being a devil was the best move. Probably not. Well, if nothing else, at least the boy would now be receptive to her teachings. That is, if he could concentrate long enough to actually learn anything. Our race has two enemies. Once Issei had calmed down from his harem high, Rias began to teach the boy some of the basic information he would need to know for his new life as a devil. Angels and fallen angels. Fallen angels are angels that have fallen from grace, signified by their black wings. They are angels who were cast out of heaven and sent to hell due to their wicked nature and impure thoughts. Naruto, who already knew most of this information being shared to the other boy, didn't pay as much attention to the lecture. Instead, he was focusing his time on the girl who had curled up in his lap. He did keep an ear out, though, just in case Rias said something she hadn't mentioned yesterday. Devils want to retain control of hell while the fallen angels are trying to take it over. We have been battling the fallen angels ever since. Huh? Issei scratched the back of his head. He looked very confused. We devils make pacts with humans for a price in order to obtain power via their desires, whereas the fallen angels take control of humans and use them to destroy devils. Moreover, Rias continued, heedless of the blank look on Issei's face. God has tasked many angels with the goal of destroying both the fallen angels and us devils, making the situation a three-way standoff. It's been like this for a long time now. That was the gist of everything, though not absolutely everything. This was just the bare-bones basic facts. Rias didn't want to bombard Issei with too much information right now. Going into a more detailed lecture about the history of the three factions would probably take several months to learn. What she told him now should be enough for him to understand his situation. Do you understand everything I just told you? Naruto watched with an amused look on his face as Issei began scratching at his cheek, his confusion more than evident. Not really. All this stuff about devils and angels and fallen angels is really too complicated for a normal high school student like me. Everyone looked at Issei with a massive bead of sweat that literally looked like a drop of water forming on the side of their heads. Naruto especially. He might not be the sharpest kunai in the set, but even Naruto was not that stupid. He could understand things so long as they weren't explained in an overly complicated way. Granted, he probably wouldn't have been able to make sense of Ria's lecture when he was 12, but that would have been more due to a lack of caring than anything else. He hated listening to lectures. Even Kaneko was now staring at Issei like he was some kind of idiot. Which he kind of was, though Naruto was being hypocritical in his thoughts. No wait. Kaneko was actually glaring at him because his inability to understand his situation had caused Naruto to stop petting her. Never mind. What about this girl? Rias decided to try a different approach and handed Issei a photograph she had grabbed from off the desk. Issei took the photo from her and looked at it. Yuma-chan, he said in shock. Staring him in the face from within the confines of the photo was none other than the girl who tried to kill him. And suicided. Where did you get this? That's the girl that almost killed you and Naruto-kun, Rias told him. She's actually a fallen angel. But then, this means she really does exist. Yes, Rias nodded, she really exists. I suspect she erased herself from everyone's minds to keep from being discovered. But then wait, Issei suddenly paused as he realized something. If you know about Yuma-chan, then that means. He looked over at Naruto, who had gone back to petting a newly blissed out Kaneko, stood up and pointed an accusing finger at the blonde ass that he felt insanely jealous of. You knew about Yuma-chan all along, didn't you? Took you long enough to figure out, Naruto smirked. Why did you tell me you didn't know her then? Asked an angry and somewhat distraught Issei. Because I thought it would be funny. The answer he received actually caused Issei to facepalt. His face smacking into the ground, the lecherous high school student groaned at his misfortune. He lifted his head a few seconds later to look at a slightly unsure Rias. So wait, you said you had reincarnated me as a devil after she killed me, right? Rias nodded, still looking a bit concerned by how Issei was acting. Then why did she try to kill me in the first place? I mean, I've never been involved in any of this devil and fallen angel stuff before. So why me? I suspect it's because you have a sacred gear. Rias explained as Issei stood back up. She looked very relieved to finally be getting down to one of the main topics she wanted to bring up. Just how things had taken so long to get to this point was beyond her. Sacred gear? Issei frowned, his head lowering and his brows furrowed as he adopted a thoughtful pose. I could have sworn I've heard that before. Akeno decided to pick up some of the slack here and began explaining what a sacred gear was to Issei. Sacred gears are basically artifacts given to humans by the original God from the Bible to enact miracles on Earth. Only humans or human hybrids are born with sacred gears, though they can show up within the ranks of devils and angels if the human possessing the sacred gear is turned. Issei, Rias got the boy's attention as she pointed at him. You have one of those sacred gears within you. A very powerful one if I'm not mistaken, which is the reason that fallen angel tried to kill you. Most likely, she was ordered to by the higher-ups who feared whatever sacred gear you possess. Issei stared at the red-haired beauty for several long, silent moments. Right before he exploded and took her words in an entirely wrong way. The lecherous second year grabbed his crotch, which he was almost positive the girl was pointing to. She wasn't, but he thought she was. I know I'm a super healthy and viral guy, but are you telling me that my penis is actually a super famous tool nicknamed the sacred gear? Within his mind, Issei conjured up an image of various women coming to claim his sacred gear for themselves. He saw them seeking it out, fighting over it, killing over it. Wars started simply because all the women in the world wanted his famous sacred gear. It would have been nice to see so many beautiful ladies fighting over his sacred gear, but if a war got started over him, then wouldn't his life be in jeopardy? Who knows how many women would fight over him and try to claim him for themselves? What if he ended up getting caught in the crossfire of one of those wars and was accidentally killed? What then? As Issei's mind began taking a most unusual and lecherous turn, the others in the room watched the perverted boy's mind run rampant. No, really. There was actually a large viewing bubble that appeared over Issei's head and was showing his thoughts to all of them like it was some kind of movie. Needless to say, the sweat dropping would not be stopping anytime soon. After the incident where everyone got an unwilling glimpse inside of Issei's mind, the group of devils collectively agreed to forget about the incident altogether. No one felt safe thinking about what they saw, the perversion that the newest member of the peerage possessed. Yes. It was much better to just pretend the whole viewing bubble thing never happened. Safer for their sanity that way too. Anyways, Issei, we're going to try to bring out your sacred gear, Rias continued. This was, of course, after she had managed to convince the boy that, No, they were not talking about his penis. It took a lot longer to convince him that his phallus was not a sacred gear than it should have, but really, what else could they have expected when dealing with a boy known for his lecherousness throughout the school? I want you to close your eyes and take a stance that makes you feel empowered. A stance that makes me feel empowered, the boy parroted, looking a little lost. He was now standing as opposed to sitting. Mainly because Rias had prompted him to stand, and who was he to deny a beautiful girl what she wanted? Still, that didn't make him any less confused by her words. What did she mean, take a stance? Was she talking about Sentai poses or something, like Kamen Rider? Naruto watched in amusement as the boy bent his legs and put his hands together like he was holding something in them. It was obvious the blonde-haired Uzumaki was enjoying himself. And why wouldn't he? Issei looked absolutely ridiculous. This is the dragon wave from my favorite manga, Doroku Sapporo. It was such a strange pose that Rias could not help but feel a small drop of sweat trickle down the side of her face. Really, what exactly was this boy doing? Did he expect the sacred gear would manifest as some kind of powerful energy blast that would annihilate everything in its path? Don't you mean the Kamehameha wave from Dragon Ball Z? Asked Naruto, butting into the moment. No, Issei retorted with a scowl. I'm not talking about that cell out of an anime. Doroku Sapporo is way better than Dragon Ball Z, though I will admit it was pretty good until after the Cell Saga. Bah! If DBZ's a sellout, then Doroku Sapporo is a copycat. They totally stole the dragon wave from Master Roshi's Kamehameha wave. Who asked you, boys? Rias said with frazzled calm. No fighting. Naruto-kun, just keep. A vein popped up on her head. She couldn't believe she was about to say this. Keep entertaining Kaneko-chan. Issei, focus. Yes, bucko, sure thing. Rias. Akeno held a hand up to hide the amused smile on her face. Things really do seem to be getting interesting these days. She gave a demure giggle. These two are most definitely unique individuals. Kiba chuckled. That's a bit of an understatement. From what I've seen, nothing's going to be boring with these two around. Rias sighed as she listened to the conversation of her peerage and began instructing Issei on how to properly activate his sacred gear. Meanwhile, Naruto focused on the cutie sitting on his lap. This would come as a surprise to most people, but this wasn't the first time he'd had a girl sitting on his lap. Or even the 100th time. Of course, that sounded a lot more explicit than it actually was. The last time a girl sat on his lap had been when he was telling the children in Konoha a story about his past exploits. Pranks. During the rebuilding process after Nagato destroyed the village. That time it had simply been the harmless act of a child wanting to be close to her hero as he shared his past with her and the other children. What was happening here was a bit different. Kaneko had all the cuteness and adorableness one would expect of a kid, i.e., her loli-like face, yet possessed the sensual body of a budding teenage girl. She may have been much more petite than Rias or Akeno, but that didn't mean she didn't have breasts or amazing hips. And dear God, she had the tightest little butt he had ever felt. This did cause a number of problems, as well as one problem that could become a serious issue if he let it grow. Thankfully, Naruto had experience when it came to keeping himself calm while in the presence of beautiful girls. You don't become the apprentice of Jiraiya and not get desensitized to things like nudity and sexual acts happening to and or around you. Naruto had 3 years of dealing with women who worked at whorehouses, taverns, and brothels. While most people never realized it, the blonde had actually grown very used to nudity during that time and had never been bothered when seeing it in front of him. It probably helped that he had created Oroi-chan, his female form when under henge, when he was younger, which required a lot of knowledge about women's bodies. Not that he would ever tell anyone that. He wasn't going to let himself get beaten over something that happened a long time ago. No way, no how. A sudden spike in energy had Naruto's head snapping over towards Issei. It was strange, but ever since Rias healed his destroyed chakra coils, his sensing abilities had been much better than before. He wondered if it had something to do with his smaller coils no longer causing his own chakra to fluctuate so wildly. Naturally, as soon as he began wondering about that, he stopped. Thinking about chakra theory gave him a headache. That was why he left the theory to Sakura. Looking at Issei, Naruto had to raise an eyebrow when he saw the thing that had appeared on his arm. It looked like a red, armored bracer with yellow accents and a green jewel on top of the back of Issei's hand. His fingers were uncovered, making it look like some kind of high-tech disc shooter or something. "That's your sacred gear," Rias said with a satisfied smile. She was quite proud of her pawn's accomplishment, despite the fact that activating his sacred gear really wasn't much of one. That didn't matter when dealing with someone of Issei's stature. In moments like this, Rias would take even the most minor of accomplishments with great satisfaction. "Amazing." Issei marveled at his bracer-covered hand. "This looks awesome." Naruto had to agree, it did look kind of cool. It would have been better if it was orange, but since it was red, he wouldn't complain too much. "That fallen angel, Yuma, thought that your sacred gear posed a threat, which is why she killed you." But wait, Issei looked over at Rias. "I'm still alive, so how?" "Just as you were about to take your last breath, you summoned me," Rias answered before he could finish his question. "Akano, give Issei a simplified pentagram." Akano handed Issei a sheet of paper. On it was a circle, a pentagram. It looked very complicated, with a lot of strange characters and symbols that Issei couldn't make heads or tails of. Still, it did look kind of familiar. "I told you before that a devil requires a signed contract in order to utilize a human's power," Rias lectured as Issei stared at the pentagram. Naruto also listened from where he sat, but didn't move. Or to be more accurate, he couldn't move. Kaneko was still purring in his lap. With this, humans can summon devils, after which they forge an agreement based on the fulfillment of a human's wish, taking power equivalent to the wish they grant. Even Naruto, who wasn't actually as stupid as he sometimes acted, thought the whole thing was needlessly complicated. He got the basics of it. Devils make a contract and grant a human their wish and in return are given power. It was sort of like how summoning creatures required something from those who summoned them. Toads required subservience to a degree and snakes required sacrifices. In return, they would aid you in battle. Still, learning the more intricate details of something had never been Naruto's strong point. It didn't help that he had a very short attention span. In recent times, humans who can draw this kind of pentagram have become very rare, almost non-existent. That's why we were giving out simplified pentagrams to people with strong desires. Both Issei and Naruto looked at Rias. "Issei, you happened to be on the street that day, where you received one from one of our familiars passing out the forms." Issei scrunched his face up as he tried to remember that moment. It took some effort, but he eventually remembered receiving the sheet of paper from a cute girl when he was waiting for Yuma to meet him for their date. Of course, remembering that moment also made him remember Yuma stabbing him in the stomach. Needless to say, Issei could not help but feel a bit depressed. Rias continued on, either unaware or ignoring Issei's increasing depression. She placed the back of her fingers against her cheek and offered the lecherous pervert a coy look. "In your dying moment, your wish was to at least die in the arms of a beautiful girl. When I was summoned, I discovered that you had a sacred gear, so I saved your life." Issei nodded his head to everything he was being told. It made sense to him, sort of. He didn't really get a lot of what they were telling him, but he understood the basics. He had been killed. Rias saved him by turning him into a devil. And if he wanted to become a harem king, he would need to grow stronger. And really, that last part was all he needed to know. Yes, not even being a devil meant anything to him so long as he could get his harem. He was perverted like that. Despite not being the kind of person who enjoyed learning new things, Naruto did find himself strangely fascinated when Rias began explaining the devil hierarchy. There were apparently 4 different classes of devils: lower, middle, upper and elite class, otherwise known as the ultimate class. The lower class devils were the ones like him, Issei, and the other members of Rias' peerage. Humans and hybrids who were reincarnated as devils. Essentially, all new devils were of the lower class. The middle class was where devils finally gained recognition and were given the titles of either baronet, baroness or knight, dame. After that was the upper class, where devils could be given titles such as marquis, margrave, margravine, count, countess, viscount, viscountess, or baron, baroness. And finally, there was the elite or ultimate class. This was the highest level one could ascend to among the devil hierarchy, with titles consisting of demon lord, great king, archduke, duke and prince, princess. Naruto really didn't care much for the titles, or for gaining nobility. He had seen what most nobles were like. The Hyuga had been a bunch of stuck-up pricks with their own heads shoved so far up their ass it was a wonder they could smell those incredibly fragrant gardens that littered their ridiculously large and expensive residence. No way in hell Naruto wanted to be like those guys. Though, thinking on it, wasn't Rias a part of the nobility? She was a really awesome person from what he had seen so far. He enjoyed spending time with her. And she couldn't be the only one among the nobility who wasn't a stuck-up snob. Right? Well, whatever. Being a noble still didn't interest him. However, he did manage to pick up something from all this. Those who were considered ultimate class devils were supposed to be the strongest rank among their species. He supposed it was similar to an S-rank ninja, which were supposed to be ninja who had skills on par with a kage but weren't actually kages, like the Sannin or members of the Akatsuki. They were recognized as the best and strongest amongst their peers. In other words, they were the ultimate badasses. And so, Naruto finally found himself with a new goal in life. He would become an ultimate class devil. No, he would become the strongest ultimate class devil. The undisputed most powerful devil in the entire world. Yes, that was his new goal. Too ambitious. Remember, this was the kid who, at the tender age of 8, decided he was going to become Hokage. Uzumaki Naruto never does anything half-assed. It was all or nothing with this guy. So if I become a noble, having a harem will no longer be a mere dream. And, of course, there was also that guy. Naruto sighed and shook his head at Issei's words. The boy had a one-track mind when it came to life. Harem this, harem that, harem Kane. It was a wonder the boy had any thoughts in his head other than harem. Truly, this boy must be Ero Sennin's reincarnation or something. That was the only logical explanation for how there could possibly be someone so perverted in this world. That's right, Rias smiled at the pair. I expect you two to work hard from now on. Yes, bucko, you've got it, Rias. Good, and for your first task, Rias showed them a flyer with a pentagram on it. You two are going to be handing out these flyers. Cat CHRP. Issei felt like crying as he stood on the sidewalk, trying to hand out flyers to people. He knew he shouldn't be taking this so hard, but he just couldn't see how handing out flyers to people would help him gain a harem. Whoever heard of a harem king handing out flyers? Clearly, this boy never heard the term baby steps before. Cheer up, Ero Debagame, Naruto said cheerfully as he handed out another flyer to someone, who smiled at him as they took it. Unlike Issei, who seemed to be having very little luck in handing out flyers, the blonde was very good at sensing people who had strong desires. It was strange. While Naruto had been good at sensing negative emotions before thanks to Kurama, he had never been able to sense people's emotional state beyond that. Was this a part of being a devil? It did sound kind of like something they would be able to do. Well, whatever, he didn't care for semantics. The point was he could, and that was all that mattered to him. Easy for you to say. Issei felt his jealousy spike as the blonde managed to get another cute girl to take one of his flyers with a smile. How is he doing that? You're not having any problems handing out flyers. That's because I'm just that awesome, Naruto replied with a bright smile. Issei felt like punching his fellow reincarnated devil's face in. Anyways, the reason none of those people are taking your flyer is because they don't have any desires. At least, none that would be enough for them to take a flyer from a strange kid passing them out. I'm not strange, Issei pouted a bit before an uncertain look came to his face. Am I? Naruto laughed before finding another target, a female with brown hair and doe-like eyes, and handed her a flyer. There sure were a lot of women who had strong desires. He wondered why that was. Then again, most women seemed to have more wants than men. Males were easy with their desires. It usually consisted of a few things: food, money, alcohol, and sex. Guys were just uncomplicated like that. Girls on the other hand seemed to have a lot more things they wanted, and some of that stuff was hard to get, like new expensive clothing and jewelry. Did that mean he would have to get girls some jewelry? He hoped not. His bank account didn't have enough to afford stuff like that, though he could always steal it, he supposed. Shaking his head, Naruto returned to the here and now. Anyways, the reason you're not doing so well is because you're just trying to hand out flyers willy-nilly. You need to find someone who has really strong desires, strong enough that they will take a flyer from someone they don't know. How do I do that? Issei was looking very awkward and confused by Naruto's words. Just how did you tell if someone had strong desires? Were they supposed to look or act differently than everyone else or something? You're a devil, aren't you? Naruto asked rhetorically. Another female passed him and he handed her a flyer with a smile. You should be able to feel out people who have strong desires. Issei frowned as he tried to feel out people with strong desires. Unfortunately, this led to him getting slapped when he ended up staring at a girl for so long that his natural propensity for perversity had him looking at her breasts. It's useless. Naruto chuckled as he handed out another flyer. You know, if you keep sucking this bad, I'm going to hand out all these flyers before you hand out even one. I hate you, Issei grumbled as he glared at Naruto, who just smiled back. I bask in your hate. 4. Learning the ins and outs of devilhood. Big effing news. Please read. I don't know how many of you know this, but a little while ago I finished writing my first original novel. I had sent it off to my editor and he is now almost done. He should be finished this weekend. I plan on having it undergo a final proofreading after that, and then I am going to get it published. With luck, my novel should be available in March. For those who are curious to know what my novel is about, here is a small summary of my hopefully soon-to-be published novel, part 1 of the American Kitsune series, A Fox's Love. Kevin Swift is a mature young man. He's independent, responsible, gets good grades, and is one of the star runners for the track team. The only thing keeping him from being Mr. Popular is this strange problem he has around girls. He just can't talk to them. At least, not without making a fool of himself. Enter Lillian Nebma. She's cheerful, vibrant, and inhumanly beautiful. She's also just plain inhuman, something Kevin learns the hard way when he discovers a naked Lillian in his apartment instead of the two-tailed fox he brought home the other day. Lillian claims he is her mate and is willing to do anything no matter how embarrassing it is for Kevin to earn his love. Needless to say, life for Kevin Swift just got a whole lot more difficult. Sounds interesting, right? I hope you guys will enjoy reading it as much as I enjoyed writing it. And now that I have thoroughly bored you to tears with my ecstatic ranting, I will let you do what you came here to do and read the next chapter of Devil Ninja. Enjoy! Chapter 4. Learning the ins and outs of devilhood. We're all finished, Rias. Naruto was wearing a mile-wide grin on his face as he waltzed into the clubroom without any sense of propriety and headed straight for the couch. Trailing in behind him was an exhausted-looking Issei. The young pervert was breathing hard and looked like he had run 12 marathons without pause. The contrast between the two couldn't be more different. The blonde bundle of energy and excitement versus the brunette who looked like he just got finished running 300 kilometers in less than a week. Where Issei looked about ready to fall over where he stood, Naruto was not only as fresh as a spring daisy but was retaining that goofy grin he seemed to wear almost 24/7. It really did show the others just how different the two were. As had now become an almost customary happening, the moment the young Uzumaki was sitting down, Kaneko, who for some reason was always in the clubroom, always crawled onto his lap so she could be pampered. Ria's delicate right eyebrow began twitching. This was also customary. I see, she took breath, then blew some of her bangs out of her face, causing her long, beautiful red hair to sway. That was much faster than I expected it would take. I had over 15,000 flyers in there, and you guys finished it within a single day. What can I say? Naruto was grinning broadly as Kaneko purred in his lap, his hands idly caressing her hair and ears. It was a very good thing he had been taught how to control his body's functions by Jiraiya. What is this woman doing to me? Resistance training, Gaki. You need to learn how to resist a woman's sexual allure or you may fall prey to seduction assassinations. That would have been much more believable if you weren't writing in that damn book of yours. Ya perv. Or the girl's cute little rear pressing up against him would have caused a very awkward situation to arise. Thank Kami for small miracles. I'm just awesome like that. And what am I? Grunted Issei as he sat down and cast an annoyed glare at Naruto. Chopped liver. The perverted boy didn't know how anyone could constantly be that bright and cheery, but it was beginning to piss him off. No wait. He was just pissed that the cute little Kaneko once again chose to sit on Naruto's lap and not his. He was a good guy, wasn't he? What did that guy have that he didn't? A lot of things, but Issei would be better off not knowing that. Well, Naruto's grin turned positively mischievous. I didn't want to say anything but he trailed off suggestively, leaving Issei's head to slump down and a small rain cloud to randomly appear over his head. Said cloud of rain soon began sprinkling a light drizzle onto the brown-haired boy's head, causing his hair and shirt to get wet. Why was everyone always picking on him? Was it because he was perverted? It wasn't like he could help that. Everybody was perverted to some degree or another. So what if he was just a bit? Okay. A lot more open about his lecherous intentions than others. That just meant girls wouldn't need to worry about him having a secret agenda. What you see is what you get with him. That's not always a good thing, Issei. Here you two are. Akeno graced the pair with her beautiful smile as she set down a cup of tea in front of each of them. Thank you, Akeno-chan. Naruto grinned at the Nadeshiko girl as she stood back up and pressed the carrying tray against her bosom. Akeno smiled in return. You're very welcome, Kitsune-kun. You're not going to stop with that, are you? Asked Naruto. His answer was a giggle and a shake of the head from Akeno. The blonde sighed, but did not dwell on Akeno's nickname for very well. There were far worse things he could think of than to be called Kitsune-kun. At least she had gotten it right and called him a fox instead of a cat. Not that there was anything wrong with cats, he just didn't like it when people nicknamed him incorrectly. Naruto eyed the tea with a speculative gleam. Then he looked down at the girl nuzzling his chest with her nose and cheek, whose head he was still petting with both hands. He went back to looking at the tea. Just how am I going to drink this? Rias nearly snorted as the blonde tried to take one of his two hands away from the task of pampering Kaneko, only to have the girl snatch it back and place it on her head. She then looked at him with those large, amber orbs, causing Naruto to cave like a wet paper towel. As the boy looked on, hopelessly trying to figure out how he could drink his tea while petting Kaneko, Rias felt a sense of vindication. It served him right for getting so close to the rook anyways. They had just met all of 4 days ago and already the two were practically inseparable. He was a member of her peerage, not Kaneko's. Kaneko didn't even have a peerage. Since you've both finished handing out flyers, let's move on to the next step. Rias decided the best thing to do would be to separate the two by starting Naruto and Issei on the next part of the new lives they would be leading as devils. It was for their own good anyways. They needed to begin forming contracts and Kaneko already had several that needed to be completed. Really, it was for the best all around. She ignored the voice that told her she just didn't like seeing Kaneko hogging all of Naruto's attention. It wasn't like she was jealous or anything. No, definitely not. The Nile is not just a river in Egypt. Alright. Issei cheered, clenching his hands into fists and pumping them in excitement. I finally graduated from doing miscellaneous jobs. If our first task was handing out flyers in order to build our base of clientele, then our next one is forming contracts with the humans who have taken our flyers. Am I right? Naruto speculated. That's right, Rias said, pleased that he was so quick on the uptake. It was even enough to make her forget her minor irritation towards Kaneko for sitting on Naruto's lap and getting pampered by him. Akeno, if you would. Of course, bucko. Akeno stepped into the center of the room. Naruto watched with interest as the raven-haired girl closed her eyes and furrowed her brows in concentration. The ground beneath her began to light up. A large circle about a meter or so in circumference drew itself on the ground, glowing a deep red. It was a very complex circle, with lettering of a language Naruto did not understand running alongside the outer layer. There were multiple, elongated ovals that spanned across the entire construct, 6 in all, forming what looked almost like an atom. About a foot from the outer layer was another circle. This one kept getting cut off whenever it ran into a line from the ovals. Running along the inner edge were several symbols, and located within the approximate location of where the line would be inside of the ovals were larger versions of the same symbol. There was another oval surrounding it, and within the oval was a 12-pointed star formed from the multiple elongated ovals that spanned the entire circumference of the whole circle. Located between each point was a symbol, and in the center of the star was one final circle. Naruto had seen many things in his life, and though he was not a master at the art, he had been pretty damn good at making seals after Jiraiya taught him during their 3-year training trip. Even with everything that he knew on sealing and all the seals he had seen, the Uzumaki had never seen something that looked so damn complicated, and this girl was making it like it was nothing. It was damn impressive. As Akeno began to chant in an unknown language, to him at least, Naruto decided to let his curiosity overtake him. What exactly is this? Rias turned from where she was watching Akeno to him. Right now we're engraving your inscription inside of the magical diagram." She tapped her chin for a moment, quickly thinking of the best way to elaborate further. The best way to explain it would be to call it the proof of our relationship, after which this magical diagram will become the basis for all the magical powers that you'll be using. Naruto wondered if he should tell her that he wouldn't need this magical diagram thingy, since he already had his jutsu, but figured that if they went through all the trouble of doing this for him, it would be rude to refuse. Besides, while he didn't really care to learn magic, it wouldn't hurt to have another trump card available. As the old saying went, it was always good to have an ace in the hole. "Naruto," said Blonde, looked up to see Rias holding her hand out towards him. "Give me your hand." The blonde nodded and stood up. Or he tried to. There was a bit of a problem that prevented him from actually walking over to Rias. Kaneko. Getting out from underneath Kaneko proved to be a bit of a struggle. It seemed the white-haired first year just did not want to get off Naruto. The girl's grip on him tightened and her face seemed to bury itself deeper into his pectoral muscles. She made the cutest mewing noises that nearly had Naruto caving in right then and there. And when she looked up at him with those eyes, those large, teary, amber orbs, the blonde just about died of mo. For the first time since watching Kaneko get pampered by Naruto, Rias found something amusing in the whole situation. Eventually, after many promises of more head petting and pampering, Kaneko allowed the blonde to leave his spot on the couch, albeit, she had the cutest pout on her face. Even Rias was tempted to tell Naruto he could sit back down when she saw that expression that seemed to be the epitome of adorableness. Not that she would give in to temptation. Naruto was her servant, not Kaneko's, and that was that. On a side note, Issei ended up passing out from a nosebleed when he saw Kaneko's pout. Standing next to Rias, Naruto held out his hand, watching as the red-haired beauty took it in her own and turned his palm towards the ceiling. Taking her pointer finger, the devil who gave him a second chance at life began drawing a circle similar, albeit much less complicated, to the one that Akeno had made. This tool will allow you to utilize the magical diagram to teleport to your summoner, Rias explained as Naruto examined the circle. After a few moments' consideration, he determined that it would be easy enough to replicate this circle on his own from now on. Though he had no clue what he would use it for. "Akeno, are you ready?" "It's ready, bucko," Akeno nodded. "You can start any time." "Okay, Naruto, stand in the middle of the magical diagram." Doing as told, Naruto stepped into the circle. Almost immediately he felt the power being emitted by the glowing circle. It was similar to, but not quite the same as chakra. The best way he could describe it was that it felt more pure, or maybe more dense. It almost reminded him of Kurama's awesome chakra, just not as powerful. "This magic circle is what you will be using to teleport to various jobs," Rias continued explaining. "The summoner will have a similar magic circle from those flyers you passed out yesterday." The light from the circle began to glow more brightly and Naruto's hair began wavering as if caught in a breeze. "Do you remember what to do once you get there?" "Make a contract with the summoner in exchange for granting their wish," Naruto recited. "I got it. You don't need to worry about me, Rias." The blonde grinned as he gave the girl a thumbs up. "I've got this in the bag." Rias could not help but be taken with his enthusiasm. She smiled and said, "Very well then. Have a safe trip, Naruto." Light soon engulfed his vision. The blonde had to actually close his eyes, it was so bright. When the back of his eyelids darkened, telling him it was finally safe for him to open them, he did so. And promptly frowned. He was definitely no longer in the clubroom, that much was for sure. But the room he had entered wasn't exactly what he had been expecting from someone summoning a devil. What had he been expecting? Basically, he had been expecting some kind of satanic-looking room with a dark atmosphere and maybe an altar or two for sacrifices or something. That's the kind of thing satanic cultists had decorating their houses, right? What he got instead was a bright, cheery room with white walls, a cream-colored floor and pink, flowing curtains. It was a very girly room. The kind he would have expected from, well, a really cute girl. Ah! Turning around, Naruto found himself being met by said really cute girl, thereby confirming his suspicions about the person who such decor belonged to. The girl in question had long black hair in princess curls, electric blue eyes and pale skin. She was very cute, which Naruto would freely attest to. She also didn't look much older than 11 or 12. This couldn't have been the person who summoned him, could she? "Excuse me, but I was wondering if you could. Mo, the girl interrupted him by crossing her arms over her chest and adopting an adorable pout. If Naruto had motherly instincts, they would have kicked in just now. I was hoping to get Kiba-kun when I summoned a devil. Naruto's right eye twitched. So this girl really did summon him then. Dear God, they were getting younger, weren't they? Still, the girl walked over to the blonde, examining him from head to toe. "Oh oi, what are doing?" asked Naruto as the girl moved behind him and pinched his butt. He squeaked and held both hands against his offended rear end. What was that for? The girl completed her circuit and took a position, standing in front of him. There was a large smile on her face and her cheeks were stained red. "You're kinda cute too," she admitted at last. Naruto felt like he had passed some kind of test or something. He wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. "That's good to know. I think." He was actually kind of disturbed by this girl. What sort of 11-year-old pinches people on the ass? Well, whatever. Time to get down to business, he supposed. This girl had summoned him after all. "So, do you have a wish you would like me to grant?" He trailed off, inviting her to tell him what she wanted. "I want you to take my virginity, Naruto stared at the girl blankly for several seconds. He then reached out with his hand and dug his pinky into his ear. When he was satisfied that all of the earwax was gone, he looked back at the girl. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I don't think I heard you properly the first time." "I want you to take my virginity." "Ah, so I wasn't hearing things," Naruto murmured. Somehow, he knew this was all Kiba's fault. That girl had mentioned Kiba when he first showed up. It couldn't be anyone else's fault. Well, it could be Issei's, but even Naruto wasn't willing to place the blame with him this time. Either way, when Naruto saw Kiba again, he was a dead man. And speaking of Issei, he wondered how the other newest member of Rias peerage was doing. Surely, he couldn't be any worse off than Naruto was, right? Cat CHRP, Issei's situation was not much better than Naruto's. In fact, it may have been even worse. Unlike Naruto, who had enough magical energy to teleport due to his recently healed up chakra coils and being in peak physical condition, Issei's magic was practically zilch. He had absolutely no magic to speak of. This had caused him a problem when he was using the magic circle that would have summoned him to the person he was going to make a contract with. It hadn't worked. According to Rias, he just did not have enough magic to use a summoning circle. It was just another reason to hate Naruto. Not only did their cute little Kahai, Kaneko, love sitting on his lap and nuzzling against him, he could use summoning circles just fine. Stupid, blonde bastard. With the summoning circle out of his reach for the time being, he had been forced to ride his bike to his first contract. This sucked big time because the person who had summoned him lived nearly 30 miles away, meaning he had to really haul ass if he wanted to get there before it was too late. Only his desire to become a harem king gave him the strength needed to carry on. Sweaty and tired, Issei had finally arrived at the residence he had been summoned to and rang the doorbell before waiting for whoever had summoned him to answer the door. He didn't know what kind of person would be waiting for him on the other side, but Kiba had said that he was often summoned by beautiful girls. Hopefully, the blonde prince's information was accurate. It would be totally awesome if he managed to get a hot girl as his first contractor. After a few seconds of waiting, the door cracked open. Neo. Issei blinked several times, having not expected that to be the first thing he heard from the person he was to be making a contract with. Then he sighed. Great. Not only was his contractor a man, he also had something as weird as a catchphrase. The door opened further and Issei began the necessary introduction. Sorry for intruding, but I was wondering. He trailed off, his eyes widening in horror. Welcome Neo. Standing on the other side of the door was what could only be some kind of monster. It was large, beefy, built like a brick shithouse with muscles on its muscles and arms bigger than Issei's head and definitely not female. Not that it wasn't trying to at least look female, it was just doing a very horrible job of it. It was wearing its hair in twin pigtails with ribbons tied into bows. It was also wearing a sailor fuku uniform that showed off its disgustingly hairy legs, with a pair of white wings sticking out from behind its back. Issei abstractly recognized the clothes as a magical girl uniform, but that wasn't something he was immediately focused on. It was more an after-the-fact detail. The thing, for that's all it could be in Issei's mind, loomed over him like some kind of indomitable fortress of pink. I've waited for so long. Neo, Issei, who was staring up at the thing with wide, teary eyes and snot dribbling down his nose, just barely managed to speak, such was his fright. Your wish. I want you to turn Miru Tan into a magical girl. Neo. He really should have expected that. What with the cosplay and all, but for some reason he hadn't. In fact, he was so startled that he was knocked out of his terror of the monstrosity before him. I think you need to go to another world for that. I've been to another world, but no one has the ability to give Miru Tan magical girl powers. The hell? This thing actually went to another world? At this point, I have been forced to make a request from my enemies, the devils, to grant my wish. Enemies. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. This was not good, so not good. I want you to give Miru Tan. I want you to give Miru Tan magical girl powers. NYOOO. Wah. I'm gonna die. Yes, Naruto may not have been the luckiest guy in the world for his first contract, but at least he didn't end up with Miru Tan. You got to be thankful for the little things in life. Right. Cat CHRP. Naruto walked into his first class much earlier than he usually did, which was normally just as the bell was about to ring. Several people looked at him as he entered, their jaws dropping as the foreign kid arrived to class early for once. Everyone knew that he hated class. Hell, he always slept in class. If that didn't say all my hate, then nothing did. Really, it was a wonder Naruto had grades as good as he did. It was a good thing that no one knew he was a top-class ninja. Taking a quick glance around, Naruto easily spotted his target, which may have had something to do with the fact that said target smiled and waved at him as if they were old buddies. He immediately began walking over to the person he had been hoping to see since last night. Hey, Naruto-san, Kiba greeted with a smile on his Bishonen face. How was your first OWCH? More eyes widened as Naruto smacked Kiba in the back of the head. Several gasps were heard by the female population, which was quickly followed by several death threats for hurting their prince. Naruto ignored them. You. The blonde hissed angrily as he leaned in to whisper to the boy. There was no need to give away the knowledge that they were devils accepting contracts to fulfill people's wishes to everyone. You knew about Saya's wish, didn't you? That's why you gave her contract to me, isn't it, you bastard? Ah, Kiba winced as he rubbed the large bump on his head. Naruto had a surprising amount of strength for a newly minted devil. So your first contract was with Saya. When Naruto's glare intensified, Kiba winced. Did you? You know. What? Naruto gawked at him for a second before scowling. Of course not. Who do you take me for? Issei? When Kiba just chuckled and rubbed the back of his head, Naruto sighed. I think I've been scarred for life. Yeah, Saya can be a bit difficult, Kiba admitted, sitting down. After a moment or two the spiky-headed blonde followed suit and sat down with a sigh. Just out of curiosity, what did you do to convince her to sign her contract? He then looked at the boy with a frown. She did sign the contract, right? Of course, Naruto told him. I gave it to Rias this morning. As for what I did, the blonde barely managed to withhold a shudder. I gave her a massage. That doesn't sound so bad, Kiba said. Usually, he had to do things that were a lot more vulgar in order to convince her to sign the contract. He had often wondered just how long he would be able to get away with simple kisses on the cheek and allowing her to do some minor groping before the precocious girl demanded more. She kept trying to make me give her a full body massage. Ah ha 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 ha. Kiba grimaced at Naruto's deadpan expression. As the bell for class rang, he made a reminder to give Naruto a list of possible females who may demand the same thing that Saya did. On the plus side, none of them were that young. That should at least keep him from getting hit again, right? Cat CHRP, Issei, I forbid you from ever going near the church again. The moment Naruto heard these words as he neared the doors to the occult research club room, he knew something was up. Deciding not to just barge in there as he was wont to do, the blonde instead leaned up against the wall right next to the door so he could listen in without being too noticeable. It sounded like Issei had done something wrong, again. To devils like us, the church is considered enemy territory, Rias continued. Naruto could almost imagine her standing behind her desk, her hands pressed flat against its surface as she looked at Issei with a combination of exasperation, concern and disappointment. If someone like you or I were to step into the church, It would create a major incident that could cause the small moment of relative peace between angels and devils to become strained. It's also a good way to get a light spear to the heart. Naruto smiled as he heard the worry in her voice. Even though her words may sound harsh to some, he could tell it was just because she did not want to see Issei get hurt. She really was a good person, caring for those under her as if they were a part of her family. And don't go near anyone who has any relationship with the church. Especially the exorcists. They are some of the worst enemies our kind has. They have been blessed by God, so they have enough power to destroy a devil, especially a lower class one like you are right now. If a devil were to be hit by their divine powers, they would be completely annihilated, with no hope of ever being reincarnated. Hearing this, Naruto raised an eyebrow. That was a useful little tidbit of information. He had heard of exorcists before, of course, but most of what he knew came from listening to people talk about these exorcism movies that seemed to be popular among horror fanatics. And those were always about evil spirits, not devils. Naruto never wanted to watch an exorcist movie, ever. This is very important, do you understand? Issei did not say anything. And if he did, it was not loud enough for Naruto to hear even with his enhanced sense of hearing. Even so, he could still imagine the perverted boy shrinking in on himself, looking absolutely intimidated by Ria's stare. Naruto had to admit, she had one hell of a stare. "Era," a familiar voice said in his ear. Naruto sighed as he realized his time spying was done. "What are you doing, Kitsune-kun?" "Just waiting for Rias to finish lecturing Issei, Akeno-chan. And listening in on their conversation, right?" Akeno asked slyly. Naruto shrugged, not at all bothered that she knew he was spying on them. It wasn't like what he was doing was harmful. Something like that. Since Rias was no longer lecturing at Issei, Naruto figured they were done anyways and decided to make his presence known. Barging into the room with his typical lack of subtlety, the blonde greeted the two as he always did. "Yo, Rias," he grinned at the redhead, getting a smile in return. Then he looked at Issei, his grin widening into one that was decidedly vulpine. "Arrow Debagame. Why do you keep calling me that?" Issei looked like he was about to cry. Or maybe he was about to hit Naruto. It was always difficult to tell between the two. "'Cause you're a perv," Naruto stated in a cheery fashion. Issei looked like someone just shot his puppy, while Rias and Akeno began giggling at him. "Don't worry though," the blonde shinobi patted the boy on the back, only to get his hand shrugged off. "There's nothing wrong with being a lech. It's simply your way of life." "Then why do you keep making fun of me for being perverted?" "Because it's fun," Issei's eye twitched violently. Rias covered her hand to hide her giggling. At the same time, Akeno coughed into hers. Not just to stifle her own giggles, but to get Rias' attention. Era, now that we've all had our fun at Issei's expense," said boy looked like someone had just struck him with lightning, which was very apt, considering who was talking about him. "I have an order of suppression from the Archduke." Naruto watched as Rias' expression morphed from its amused expression to a much more serious one. He raised an eyebrow, tempted to ask about what an order of suppression was, but decided not to, figuring he would get an answer soon enough. He had no idea how right he was. Cat CHRP, Naruto found himself standing alongside Akeno, Kaneko, Kiba, Issei and Rias later that night. The full moon was out, its moonbeams shining down upon them and casting an eerie glow on the abandoned mansion they stood in front of. It was here that Rias had led them to after receiving the order of suppression from that Archduke guy. Said mansion looked like it had once been a grand home filled with ostentatious decorations that would be par for the course of most homes where rich, snobbish people lived. Now it was run down and abandoned. A derelict building that looked like it had been the victim of several decades worth of neglect. The walls were cracked and stained. Moss and vines had overgrown much of the structure. The windows were broken, yet the inside was too dark for even Naruto's vision to pick anything out. The place was truly in great disrepair. "Listen up you two," Rias attracted Naruto's and Issei's attention. "This will be important for you two to remember, as it's something that we will likely be called on to do again in the future." Naruto instantly perked up as he focused his attention on Rias. At that moment, she sounded very much like a Junin about to instruct her genin. It was actually kind of nostalgic. "Rogue devils are underling devils much like yourself, except they ended up betraying their masters and went rogue. most of them that strike out on their own act like nothing more than rabid dogs. And much like rabid dogs, they need to be put down. One of the laws of our kind is that if a rogue devil is found, they are to be destroyed with extreme prejudice. Naruto found himself nodding his head as he stored the information away. It was actually very familiar to him, as it reminded him of how shinobi villages dealt with their missing ninja. Missing ninja were not only security risks due to the simple fact that they had gone rogue, but also contained a lot of secrets within their bodies that could be used to buy other villages if they fell into the wrong hands. That was why they needed to not only be killed, but their bodies destroyed entirely. That made him wonder, when rogue devils were killed, did they need to take the head back as proof of the kill? And could people earn bounties by killing them? For a second, Naruto pondered the idea of hunting rogue devils for cash. It might be a good idea to earn money. He quickly discarded the idea, however. He understood the necessity of eliminating people when they became dangerous to the safety of innocents, but he had never enjoyed killing. "I take it that's why we're here?" asked Naruto, gesturing towards the empty house. "There's a rogue devil in there and we've been ordered to destroy it?" Rias flashed him a pleased smile. "Yes, that is it exactly. We've recently received reports that humans have gone missing around here. Normally, we wouldn't bother with rumors, since there are a number of humans that go missing all the time, but these reports claimed that the missing were all seen entering this house and never came out. That's normally a sign that a rogue devil has taken up residency and is luring humans in to eat them." She paused, then added, "It helps that the Archduke informed us that there was a rogue devil in our territory." "Sounds like a nasty business," Naruto muttered while Issei paled at the knowledge that there were devils who ate humans. "It is," Rias admitted solemnly. The group soon made their way into the house. The stench of blood clung heavily to the air. Naruto, with his enhanced senses, nearly gagged on the scent. It was only because he had grown so used to the smell of blood during the Fourth Great Ninja War that he was able to keep the bile wanting to rise in his throat down. Issei was not nearly as lucky. The boy's face was green and he looked like he might vomit at any moment. Naruto felt some sympathy for the kid. He had been just a regular person before he got caught up in all this due to that sacred gear in his arm. It really wasn't fair to him that he had to deal with this new lifestyle that he was in no way prepared for. Among those who seemed to have trouble dealing with the scent was Kaneko, whose nose was crinkled in disgust and her face took on a shade of green similar to Issei's. She probably had enhanced senses like Naruto did, being what she was. Naruto closed distance with her and absently handed her a cloth soaked in perfume. "Don't ask where he got the perfume or the cloth, just go with it." Kaneko smiled in thanks as she gratefully took the cloth and used it to cover her nose. "Issei, Naruto," Rias said as they fully entered the mansion. The sound of their footsteps echoed loudly in the empty hallway. "This will be a good chance for you to see how we devils battle." She paused for a second, then added, "I should also probably take the time to explain how the servant system works and what traits you gain as one." Issei scratched the back of his head in obvious confusion. "What do you mean by traits?" That question was all Rias needed to begin her lesson. "I've already explained the relationships between the devil, angel and fallen angel factions. The three-way war between those three factions left all sides exhausted in both moral and strength. A large number of pure blood devils lost their lives, and there simply weren't enough of us to make up for the losses we suffered. Because of this, we needed to find a way to build our forces back. This was how the evil peace system was put into place." Issei gave Rias a look that said he had no clue what she was talking about. Naruto didn't either, but figured she would explain and thus kept himself from reacting too overtly. "Do either of you know what chess is? Isn't that, like, the European version of shogi?" asked Naruto, frowning a bit. Rias gave him a nod. "In a manner of speaking, it's very similar to shogi, but different at the same time. The pieces in chess are king, queen, knight, rook, bishop, and pawn. Each piece has its own unique traits." The group began searching for the wayward rogue devil as Rias continued explaining how the evil peace system worked. So far there had been no sign of the one they had been ordered to exterminate. Naruto was just surprised by how clean the place was. Aside from some overturned furniture and a thick layer of dust, there was nothing to show it was being used by anyone. Given that this rogue devil was supposed to be eating humans here, he would have expected there to be blood splatters or even a half-eaten corpse of two. At the very least there should have been signs of a struggle. For the same reason, each servant undergoes training in a different ability. Although they do not have many skills, they are very powerful in the ones they do know. Rias paused for a moment as she looked inside a room that had once been a sitting area. Nothing but discarded chairs and broken tables were there now. Because of this, the evil piece system has become very popular since its conception. It's actually gotten to the point where those resurrected as an evil piece are being used in a competition called a rating game between nobles. Rating game? Asked Issei, a clueless look on his face. Rias placed a hand against a pair of large double doors as she answered him. This was the last place they hadn't looked. To put it simply, a rating game is essentially pitting servants resurrected under the evil piece system in a live fire exercise similar to chess. It's actually gotten to the point where it could influence a devil's position and rank within the nobility. Naruto scratched his chin as he read between the lines of her words. Which means that, at some point, you're going to be expected to participate in a rating game, right? I'm still not a mature devil, so it's a ways off, Rias assured Naruto as she pushed open the door. There was a loud rattle followed by the creaking of hinges that had long gone unused as the door opened slowly. I still can't officially enter the arena. The room beyond was pitch black. Darkness beyond darkness that no amount of enhancements would be able to pierce clung to the room like a cloak. And what about unofficially? Asked Naruto, his words making Rias smile. The blonde really was quite smart. Issei groaned as he rubbed his head. I don't really understand any of this. And what piece am I anyways? Naruto perked up. He was also curious to know what piece he had been resurrected under. Naruto, Issei, you two are. What a delicious scent. A voice interrupted Rias from saying any more. Everyone present turned their attention towards the darkness of the room they were entering. With the doorway open, some light began creeping in, illuminating a bit of the room beyond, though not by much. It's coming, Rias murmured darkly as she glared around the room. Noticing her look, Naruto allowed a kunai to slide into his right hand and held it in a reverse grip. But it's also mixed with something foul. I think she's smelling herself, Naruto said out loud, his words causing Akeno to giggle while Rias and Kaneko smiled. Kiba looked somewhat amused, but was also sweat dropping at the very Naruto-ish comment. He had heard more than enough of those in class. Rogue Devil Visor, we are here to destroy you, Rias shouted into the darkness beyond. Naruto's eyes sharpened as his ears picked up a dull thud some feet away. He still couldn't see anything due to whatever had moved being covered in darkness, but judging by the rhythmic thuds that followed, whatever it was coming towards them. Something flew out of the darkness. Naruto and everyone who had combat experience, that is to say, everybody except Issei, tensed and prepared to react. They relaxed a moment later, though only slightly, when they realized what it was that had flown out of the darkness and now lay on the ground with blood pooling around it and staining the wood paneling of the floor. Issei did not relax. If anything, he began to panic. A corpse, once again. Naruto felt a moment of sympathy strike him as the boy turned green and began to practically hyperventilate. It was clear to him that his fellow servant was in no way prepared for this kind of lifestyle. What a nice scent. It smells so delectable that I just want to eat you up. Perhaps when I do, I'll get the chance to see if your blood is as red as your hair. Naruto's eyes snapped towards the source of the voice to find that he could finally see who it was. A somewhat attractive female with messy hair, red eyes and no shirt to cover her jiggling boobs. Or at least, she would have been a moderately attractive female if it weren't for the fact that her lower half was anything but human. Naruto didn't know what kind of beast she was, but the lower portion of her body looked like an accident between a lion and some kind of arachnid. 4 large legs with pawed feet kept the thing standing and balanced. There was a prehensile tail sticking out of her hindquarters, and her entire body was covered in fur. Truly, she was an ugly motherfucker. Oppai, naked oppai. Naruto face palmed as he heard Issei's shout. He sees what had to be the ugliest chick in the entire world, and that's the first thing he says. Granted, her top half was alright. Nowhere near as sexy as Rias or Akeno, and she wasn't even cute enough to compete with Kaneko's tight little body, but it wasn't like her upper body was bad. However, that bottom of hers just killed it. It wasn't even that she had way too much junk in her trunk, just that the trunk she did have was the ugliest damn trunk he had ever laid eyes on. Well, Naruto supposed Issei wasn't known for being the most lecherous existence at school for nothing. There was a reason he had taken to calling the boy Arrow de Begame, after all. What an unsightly appearance. Rias crossed her arms under her chest. It suits you well. What a pretentious little girl, Visor snarled out. Naruto noticed that her human hands were holding onto 2 bloody javelins. I'm going to enjoy staining your corpse with fresh blood as dark as your crimson hair. HMPH, Rias smirked and took up a gesture of haughty poise. I guess it's true what they say about smaller dogs having a louder bark. Visor seemed to realize that she had just been insulted. She did not take too kindly to it. Why you bitch? Rearing one of her javelins back, she prepared to throw it, or maybe to close distance and stab Rias. Naruto didn't know. She never got the chance. Yuto. Got it. Kiba darted forward, his hands held out on either side, his body becoming nothing more than a blurry streak. Twin swords appeared within his grasp as he reached Visor, who switched targets from Rias to him. Well, perhaps I should continue our lesson from earlier, Rias said as she watched the proceedings with a single hand on the curve of her shapely hip. Kiba had just dashed in at speeds that Visor had no hope of keeping up with, his twin swords flashing and slicing off one of her arms in a spray of gore. As the rogue devil roared in agony, Rias spoke some more. As you can see, Yuto is a knight, which focuses on incredible speed. Die insect. Visor roared as she lifted a foot to squash Kiba flat. The young swordsman did not move an inch as the foot began descending, for at that moment, Kenko jumped in, her hands stretched out above her head. Kaneko-chan. Issei shouted in shock. Don't worry, Issei, Rias said as she and the others not involved in combat yet watched as the foot tried to stomp Kaneko into the ground. It didn't, or rather, it couldn't, as the white-haired first year managed to hold the woman's foot above her head without breaking a sweat. Kaneko is a rook. As she continued speaking, the ground beneath Kaneko's feet cracked as she liberally shoved the foot she had been holding above her head off, causing Visor to stumble, and a rook's trait is insane strength and defense. In retaliation for getting shoved away like a 50-pound weakling, Visor's tail lashed out and Kaneko struck the young girl. Said amber-eyed cutie was sent flying and only stopped when she smashed her into a wall. The force behind the attack was so great that the wall actually crumbled and Kaneko was blown through it. That level of attack won't work on Kaneko, Rias said, smiling as she twirled a strand of hair between her fingers. Indeed, when the smoke cleared, Kaneko looked completely unscathed. Not even her skirt was scuffed in any way. Time for you to be blown away. Using the incredible strength granted to her as a rook, Kaneko shoved herself off the ground and was blasted into the air, her left hand clenched into a fist and held above her head. She looked kind of like Superman, or Supergirl, as she was way too cute to look like that Boy Scout with the penchant for wearing underwear over his pants. Like a rocket, the cute little first year crashed straight into Visor's underbelly. The power behind her attack had so much force to it that the much larger devil was blown off the ground and launched in a parabolic arc before descending and crashing straight through a wall. Kaneko clapped the dust off her hands, that bored look still on her face, so weak. Hee, Naruto smiled as he walked up to the girl he had taken such a shine to, and began rubbing her head. The blank expression turned into one of bliss as she leaned into his hand. You really are something, Kaneko-chan. Kaneko just purred in response. Still standing where she had been since the start of the battle, Ria's eye twitched at the scene. Can you two not do that here? We're still in combat, you know? Ah, right. Naruto chuckled sheepishly as he took his hand off Kaneko's head, causing the first year to pout. My bad. Visor moaned in pain. How can a group so young be so strong? And now you'll get to see the last member of my peerage after you two. Rias decided to ignore what had happened between Kaneko and Naruto. There was no reason to get upset over it anyways. It's not like she was jealous or anything. Akeno. Of course, bucko. Akeno was all smiles as she clapped her hands in front of her face. There was something seriously disturbing about that pleasant and beautiful smile. Issei felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Now, I wonder how I should do this. As a smiling Akeno began to slowly walk towards the struggling to stand Visor, Rias continued her lecture. Akeno is my queen. Why you bitch? Era, smiling despite the insult, or maybe even because of it, Akeno tilted her head and looked down at the rogue devil. You're still so energetic it seems. I guess that means you can withstand more punishment. A flash appeared within the room. Then, how about I try something like this? Zeet. Akano raised her hand and sparks of lightning shot from her fingertips into the air, then descended upon the hapless visor. Gra. As a queen, Akano has all the abilities of a pawn, knight, bishop and rook. She's the invincible vice president of our club. As Rias spoke, Naruto found himself paying extra attention to Akano. He had noticed something off about her as she began zapping lightning at visor. Akino's breathing had picked up drastically, despite an attack of that level not being anywhere near enough to tire someone like her out. There was a heavy blush staining her cheeks as well, and she was squeezing her thighs together and shuddering in ecstasy every few seconds. Oh my! Akano licked her lips as she stared at the charred body of visor, the small flush on her cheeks increasing to a brighter red. It looks like you can still continue. I wonder how long you can keep this up. Naruto had seen that look before. It was a look he had seen a few times on particularly drunk women when he entered a brothel with Ero Sennin during their training trip. He would recognize that expression anywhere. Akano mainly specializes in attacking her opponents with magic. Akano, her breathing erratic as if she had just finished a 6-hour romp fest, lifted her hand again, a large smile on her flushed cheeks. The way she licked her lips was as freaky as it was enticing. She is also the world's biggest sadist, Zeet. Gaia. That was the sound of visor being electrocuted again, and again, and again, and again. Akano, it seemed, loved toying with her opponents. Naruto was strangely reminded of Anko as he watched the Yamato Nadeshiko work. God bless that crazy snake lady's sexy soul. As Issei shivered in fear from watching Akano take sexual pleasure from causing mass amounts of pain, Kiba made to reassure him. Don't worry too much. The vice president is very gentle with her allies. Zeet. Gra. Issei shivered again as he turned around and saw Akano blasting what now looked like a well-done steak with more lightning. Naruto whistled as he walked up to the pair. Is it wrong that I find Akano to be extremely sexy right now? Staring at the blonde like he was something diseased, Issei quickly moved away, hoping he would not get infected by whatever Naruto had. Ha! Akano sighed, her body shuddering with post-orgasmic bliss as she held a hand to her cheek. It seems that still wasn't enough to kill her. Issei's sweat dropped as he looked at visor. She may not be dead, technically, but she was most certainly not what he would call alive either. I suppose I'll let the president have the final blow. Rias walked up to the thoroughly defeated visor, stopping just a few feet away. Her was face blank, a perfectly composed mask befitting a devil of her high standing. Do you have any last words? Kill me. Very well then, Rias smiled, her eyes sharpening and turning a tad feral. Naruto would admit, it was even sexier than watching Akano get aroused by causing pain. He must be turning into some kind of masochist. Damn that Jiraiya. It seems some of his ways were sticking. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. As Rias held up her hand, what looked like a ball of black energy erupted above her palm. With an almost absent-mindedness, she held it out towards visor and then let it loose. The effect was impressive. The energy slammed into visor, creating an inferno of dark flames that, upon vanishing, revealed the rogue devil they had been sent to kill was no more. There was nothing left, not even drop of blood to stain the floor with. Naruto whistled. Now that was impressive. And he wasn't lying, though he had seen much more impressive battles and attacks. And if he could be so bold, felt that his battles against people like Nagato, Tobi and Madara were far more impressive, it did not mean what he had seen here was any less incredible. He had never seen something get so thoroughly destroyed to the point where there was not even charred remains. It's over everyone, Rias smiled at her peerage, let's go back and have some tea. Everyone began to leave. It wasn't like there was any reason left to stay in the dump of a mansion, and with no more reason to stay, no one wanted to continue smelling all the blood that Visor had left in the house. Excuse me, bucko. Rias turned to look at Issei, what is it? I was just wondering. Issei began, you never explained what my role was. I have to admit, I'm curious to know what I am as well, Naruto said. Truthfully, he didn't think he would need whatever abilities he gained from his piece, but he was curious nonetheless. That's right, she eyed the two. I forgot to tell you what you two are. Issei, your role is. Issei grinned and rubbed his hands together, probably thinking he was something awesome like a knight or rook, pawn. He was disappointed. You mean to tell me I'm the lowest rank there is? Issei began crying. Large streams of tears like waterfalls came pouring out of his eyes in mass quantities, running down his face. Strangely enough, these tears did not stain his clothes. How odd. There, Naruto patted the boy's shoulder. It'll be alright. Don't patronize me, nay, Rias, Naruto said. I'm curious, what piece am I? You? Rias frowned, her countenance shifting from amused to uncertain. I don't know. What do you mean? Asked Naruto, now also frowning. How can you not know? The piece I used on you was very special. It was given to me by my older brother. She paused to gather her thoughts. It's called a mutated piece. It's basically a chess piece that was normal at one point, but mutated and became something else. It contains all the original powers of the original piece it was, but it's no longer a proper representation of that piece and is much stronger than it was originally. I see, so you can't determine what it was then? Rias shook her head. I'm afraid not. She smiled and tried to add some brevity to the situation. I guess that means we're going to discover what your piece is together. Naruto found himself smiling as well. Truthfully, he didn't care what his piece was. Naruto would not need whatever trade it gave him. All he needed were the skills he had honed to perfection back in his home world. He would be the strongest devil in the world regardless of what his evil piece was. That was a promise. Detbeo. Omake, a request gone wrong. Rias was sitting at her desk late at night, working on some paperwork. It wasn't something she enjoyed doing. Paperwork, that is, but it was something that needed to get done. As the heiress to an old and powerful clan of devils, and the owner of the city, it fell upon her to do it. It was just another reason she didn't like being the heiress to a powerful family. She could almost see why her brother was always trying to skip out on his paperwork. Exhaling a deep breath, Rias finished the last of the papers. Setting down her pen, she grabbed the last sheet of paper and moved it from the unfinished section to the finished section on her desk. The busty young redhead leaned back in her comfortable leather seat, her arms stretching up behind her head, causing her breasts to jiggle enticingly. Had Issei been there at that moment, he would have likely been blown straight through a wall by a nosebleed. Just as Rias was about to stand up and head to the room containing her bed, a bright, orange light filled the room. Blinking, she looked over at the floor, where a summoning circle she recognized as belonging to Naruto appeared. A second later said boy appeared within the single. Rias raised an eyebrow. Naruto? Her voice had him snapping his eyes over to her, a frantic look in them. Rias, like a man who had just seen his life raft after being tossed into a raging maelstrom. Naruto rushed over to her. Rias would have leaned back as the blonde-haired Uzumaki placed his hands on her shoulder and began shaking her back and forth. Quick! You have to hide me. You have to save me. Hide you? Save you? Rias gripped the frantic blonde's forearms to stop him from shaking her. What's going on, Naruto? And why are you shirtless? She looked at him again, then blinked. And is that glitter? It was indeed. Covering Naruto from head to toe was mass quantities of glitter. His defined, male body sparkled and shone with each movement, even as thousands of tiny sparkles flew off him from his frantic movements. The blue-eyed devil looked almost like he had been shot at point blank with several glitter cannons. Never mind that. Naruto's panicked eyes flickered around the room, as if he were expecting to be attacked any second now. You have to protect me. Protect you? Rias' eyebrows furrowed. From what? From them. Rias was just about to open her mouth and ask who them was, but never got the chance. At that exact moment, the door to the occult research club room was busted open. Oh God! They found me. Rias blinked as several dozen girls, all covered in glitters and sparkles and glow-in-the-dark armbands rushed into the room. There he is. Let's get them. Come back here, Naruto-kun. You'll never take me alive. Quicker than Rias could actually follow, Naruto bolted towards the window. Seconds later, the glass was shattered as the blonde jumped through the window without even bothering to open it. After him girls. It wasn't long after Naruto had left that the girls filed out of the room, leaving Rias alone. Said buxom beauty could only sit there, staring at the now broken down door and busted window with wide, blinking eyes. What just happened?